The first time Julian saw him, he was nothing, a forgotten prince cowering in the shadows of the royal castle's derelict north tower. Elias was the Lord Commander, second only to the king, a man whose power was absolute. He had just come from an execution, the scent of blood still clinging to his black leather armor. He knelt, the steel of his gauntlets stark against the grimy stone, and offered a hand. He asked, his voice low and devoid of pity, if Julian was ready to leave this place. Now, years later, under the canopy of the royal bed, it was Elias who lay beneath him, his eyes burning with a crimson fury. He snarled, his voice a strained whisper, questioning if this was the culmination of his teachings, if he had spent years molding a monster who would turn on his own mentor. Elias was trapped, his body betraying him, pain and humiliation warring in his gaze. Not even during the coup, when he had personally cut down the former king, had Julian seen him so undone. The Lord Commander had always been a figure of chilling composure, a man who could order a death with a placid smile. Elias hissed Julian's name, asking if this depraved, unnatural obsession was the only lesson he had learned. Julian surfaced from his own ragged breathing, his gaze tracing the lines of the face that had haunted his every waking and sleeping moment. He leaned down, placing a kiss on each place he had worshipped from afar for so long. He pressed a single finger to Elias's damp lips, silencing him. He murmured a soft question, wondering if Elias truly wished to raise his voice and let the entire castle bear witness to his current state of surrender. Elias's struggles subsided, but the murderous rage in his eyes did not. Julian told him then, his voice a raw sigh of contentment, that if this night was the price of his life, he would pay it gladly. Perhaps the genuine sincerity in his tone struck a chord in the older man. A deep, weary sigh escaped Elias. He asked, his voice laced with a profound sadness, if he had failed Julian so completely over the years. Julian paused, a small smile playing on his lips. He thought it was quite the opposite. Without Elias, he would have perished in that wretched tower long ago. His mother was a lady-in-waiting, a fleeting fancy of his father, the king, during a drunken revelry. She was beautiful but low-born, and after giving birth to him, she was quietly dismissed and died of a convenient illness. The king, at the time, was deeply enamored with his queen, promising her a reign of singular devotion. Naturally, Julian, a bastard born before the true heir, was an unwelcome stain on that promise. He was cast into the North Tower to be forgotten. The castle staff were experts at discerning the currents of power. An unloved prince was worth less than the lowest stable boy. Until he was 5, a kind old chambermaid who had known his mother smuggled him food. Then she was caught stealing a silver locket for him and was flogged to death. After that, Julian learned to survive on scraps from the kitchens, to warm the bathwater for the tower guards in exchange for a piece of coal for the hearth. When he was 10, 2 guards stole the locket, the last remnant of his mother. He begged for its return, bowing his head until his forehead split open on the cold stones. They found his desperation amusing and tossed the cheap trinket into the castle moat. He wiped the blood from his face, a cold clarity settling in his young mind. He realized then that subservience was a path to nothing but a slower death. He picked up a heavy iron poker from the fireplace and, without hesitation, swung it at their heads. His strength was lacking, but the blows were disabling. They fell, gurgling like landed fish, their blood spattering his face. The poker fell from his trembling hands. It was in that moment, as he turned, that he saw Elias standing in the doorway, having watched the entire sordid affair. He knew of this man, Elias Vance, the only Lord Commander not of royal blood, the sharpest weapon in his father's arsenal. He seemed to have come directly from battle, his dark tunic still damp with drying blood that traced a path from his collarbone into the shadows of his clothing. Elias's voice was calm as he identified Julian as the forgotten first son. He was a handsome man, barely out of his youth, with a tall, lean build that suggested a scholar rather than a warrior. A faint, unreadable smile touched his lips, playing in his sharp, intelligent eyes. Julian, stunned, could only nod numbly. The guards behind Elias slammed him to his knees at the commander's feet, forcing his head down like a feral dog awaiting the butcher. Yet Julian's eyes still held the spark of murder. Elias let out a soft, contemptuous laugh, calling him a useless thing, fit only for groveling on the floor. He used the tip of his boot to tilt Julian's chin up, his tone flat. He told him if he wanted to kill, he needed the power to stand over his enemies, not crawl beneath them. He stepped forward, kneeling to pick up the bloody poker. With a clean, efficient movement, he brought it down on the throat of one of the still groaning guards, silencing him permanently. He told Julian to watch closely, that this was how it was done. Then he held out his hand, the leather cool against Julian's skin. He asked again if he wanted to go with him. Julian looked up and met his gaze, cold and sharp as forged steel. In that split second, the most critical decision of his life was made. He took the offered hand, its warmth a stark contrast to the blood that stained it. He agreed. He knew even then that following Elias was a dangerous path. The man commanded the Aegis, an elite unit whose only loyalty was to the throne. His rescue of Julian was not an act of mercy. The borders were unstable, the crown prince was weak, and the court needed a pawn, a spare prince who could be sacrificed for the heir. For the next 5 years, he was raised within the Aegis, subjected to their most grueling training. During the day, he learned to fight. In the evenings, Elias himself taught him history, strategy, and statecraft. Confused Julian. He couldn't understand why a prince destined to die needed to learn the arts of ruling. Elias, half shrouded in the candlelight of the library, would simply state that as a man of royal blood, it was his birthright to learn such things, regardless of his fate. Elias was far more learned than Julian had ever imagined. He was a better teacher than the royal tutor whose lessons Julian used to eavesdrop on as a child. When the queen, in her paranoia, ordered that Julian be used as a test subject for the royal alchemists and their volatile potions, Elias was silent for a long time. Later, in a rare moment of vulnerability, Julian had sought him out, and Elias had held him, his voice a bare whisper against his ear, telling him not to be afraid. On his 16th birthday, Elias escorted him to the crown prince's wing of the castle to formally begin his service. As they parted, Elias told him that his life was more important than the prince's. He called him Julian. It was the first time he had used his name with such familiarity. For the sake of that single word, Julian endured multiple assassination attempts meant for the prince, surviving even a poisoned blade that nearly stopped his heart. When he turned 18, the crown prince ascended the throne. The new queen, consumed by jealousy, drove Elias's younger sister, Lady Alara, to hang herself in her chambers. Her 13-year-old daughter was to be sent away, married off to a foreign warlord to secure an alliance. Julian sent a message to Elias. The Lord Commander rode through the city gates on his warhorse, his armor splattered with the blood of the city guard who had tried to stop him. On the high steps of the throne room, Julian held a knife to the new king's throat and smiled as Elias approached. Elias praised his work, his hand closing over Julian's on the knife. With the swift, economical motion of a man gutting a fish, the new king's life ended. Then Elias turned and ran toward his sister's chambers without a backward glance. In many ways, Elias was a reflection of what Julian might have become under different circumstances. Elias's family had found him, an orphan of war, and raised him in their military tradition. He had entered royal service in place of their own son, becoming a shadow guard to the prince who would become Julian's father. But the royal family was inherently cruel. Loyalty was a currency they spent freely but never repaid. Elias's service was rewarded with the king taking his childhood sweetheart, his intended bride, as a royal consort. With the king growing ill and the new prince still a boy, Elias's power had grown, making him the only non-royal regent in the kingdom's history. But the price was high. The young, brilliant commanders of his house died in convenient border skirmishes or were crippled in tragic accidents. Elias was not a fool. His loyalty had a limit. Selecting Julian, the forgotten prince, was the beginning of his own quiet rebellion. After a night of fire and steel, the blood was washed from the palace stones, and the city had a new master. Julian found Elias in Lady Elera's chambers. He was holding her lifeless body and had been sitting there all night. Julian's voice was a raw croak when he said Elias's name. Elias looked up, his face a mask of grief, his eyes asking the question he couldn't voice. If Julian had sent the message an hour sooner, Elera might still be alive. She had died clutching a small wooden bird Elias had carved for her as a child, waiting for the brother who had promised to always protect her. Julian opened his mouth, but no sound came out. A sharp, violent pain erupted in his chest, and he coughed up a mouthful of blood, collapsing like a shattered vase before Elias's horrified eyes. The last thing he saw before darkness took him was Elias rushing toward him, his composure finally broken. It was enough. He still cared. He didn't know how long he was unconscious. In the fleeting moments of awareness, he would see Elias by his bedside, his brow furrowed with worry. He heard the hushed, fearful voice of a physician explaining that the prince had been afflicted with the same poison as Lady Elera. He said that if not for the powerful antidote, the king's folly, already in his system, he would not have survived. King's folly. Julian struggled to open his eyes, wanting to see the expression on Elias's face. That antidote was a legendary herb, blooming only once every 50 years. Elias had intended to give it to his sister to bolster her delicate health, but had sent it to Julian a month prior after hearing he'd been gravely wounded. If he had known, would he still have given it to Julian? When he finally awoke for good, the room was empty. He tried to sit up, desperate to find Elias, but his body was weak, and he fell heavily to the floor. Elias rushed in then, dressed in simple, unadorned clothes, his hair tied back loosely. He caught Julian, his voice sharp with annoyance as he asked if he was in such a hurry to die again after just cheating death. Julian, feeling a childish sense of grievance, asked where he had been. Elias scoffed, his tone gruff, explaining that while Julian had been sleeping for a month, someone had to manage the chaotic affairs of the kingdom. Julian studied him, his gaze moving over every feature. Elias had grown thinner. Noticing his scrutiny, Elias looked away, unnerved, and told Julian to look at his own reflection, that he resembled a prisoner just released from the dungeons. They were never men of many words. In the past, their time together was spent in training, punctuated by Julian's occasional complaints and Elias's instruction. Now, the silence was different. The boy he had raised from nothing was now his king. It created an awkwardness, a disruption of their established dynamic. Julian broke the silence, his voice firm. He told Elias that whatever he was before, he would remain. To Julian, as king, nothing about their relationship would change. Elias checked his pulse, confirming the poison was truly gone, and nodded. He started to speak of court etiquette and the necessity of new protocols after the coronation, but Julian cut him off. He couldn't save Alara. The words tumbled out, desperate and sharp in the quiet room. He explained that the old queen had hated him, but she had hated Alara more for stealing the king's affection. From the moment the new king was announced, both he and Alara were prisoners, forced to take the poison. He hadn't known the king's folly would act as an antidote. He'd only assumed his body, hardened by years of alchemical testing, was resisting the toxin more slowly. As he spoke, he carelessly let his sleeve fall, revealing a series of fresh, unhealed cuts on his arm. He asked Elias, his voice small, if he was angry with him. Elias was silent for a long time. Then he picked up a jar of salve and began to dress the wounds. He told Julian that the path they had chosen was one of life and death, and while he grieved, Julian's survival was his greatest consolation. His head was bowed, his expression hidden, but he was so close that Julian felt if he just tilted his head, he could kiss the worry from his brow. His Elias. He was softer than anyone knew. The world saw him as a ruthless killer, a demon in the guise of a handsome man. But Julian knew the truth. He knew Elias arranged for the quiet burial of his enemies, that he found ways to give the innocent families of his targets new lives elsewhere, that he could be swayed by his father's nostalgia for the old days. During training, Julian would only ever complain of pain when they were alone. Elias would scold him harshly by day, but would always come to his tent at night to secretly apply medicine to his bruises. That was why, from the first moment Julian saw the depth of Elias's affection for his sister, he knew she had to die. After his coronation, Julian elevated Elias, making him his equal in all but name. He invented 100 excuses to keep him in the royal palace, to have him live and dine with him. When Elias protested that it was against protocol, Julian's voice grew heavy. He told him the palace was too large, too empty. He reminded him of the night he had taken his hand in the North Tower and asked if he could not keep holding it now. He saw Elias hesitate. After so many years together, Julian knew him better than anyone. Elias saw himself as a brother, a father figure, and he carried a deep guilt for the harshness of Julian's training. The unspoken half of his plea, "Stay with me, I need you," hung in the air. Julian had not yet dared to hope for more. He only wanted him near. But then, Elias's father, the old duke, returned from the borderlands. The man had lost a son and a daughter to the service of the crown, and he wanted to take his last remaining child away from the capital. He even brought with him a young woman, a distant cousin who bore a striking resemblance to the late Lady Alara. Julian saw the flicker of stunned recognition in Elias's eyes, and a cold dread seized him. His hand, hidden in the folds of his robes, clenched so tightly that his nails drew blood. Why? Was it so much to ask for him to simply stay? On the third day of Elias's visit to his family estate, Julian's resolve broke. He dispatched a rider with falsified intelligence about an imminent border crisis, ordering the old duke to return to his post immediately. He had the girl drugged and placed on the duke's carriage. Then, he went himself to see Elias, armed with a powerful, fast-acting sedative. Paralyzed and helpless, Elias was brought to the royal bedchamber. Julian sat by the bed for a long time, his eyes tracing the form of the man lying there. Since the moment he had understood desire, Elias had been its sole object. He remembered one night, the moon a sliver of ice in the sky, when Elias had been training him in close-quarters combat. He had been cold and critical, chiding Julian for his sloppy footwork. He'd shed his outer coat, his movements economical and deadly, each strike perfectly placed, only to pull back at the last second. In the flickering torchlight, a small, dark mole near the corner of Elias's eye had seemed to dance, a fleeting thing he could never quite focus on. The image had stayed with him, and he'd woken from a dream of it, his body slick with a sweat that had nothing to do with training. He had sat there in the pre-dawn stillness, unmoving, as the sun rose. In that moment, he knew he had found the thing for which he would gladly burn. And now that man was here, seemingly his for the taking. With an almost religious reverence, he leaned down and pressed the first kiss to Elias's forehead, as if afraid to startle a dream. Then to the corner of his eye, where the small mole finally met his lips, no longer an elusive dream. He moved slowly, deliberately, until his lips finally found Elias's. It was then that he met a pair of eyes, wide with incandescent rage. Elias's voice was a hoarse rasp, thick with the drug, as he demanded to know what Julian was doing. All control shattered. Julian leaned down again, his actions a stark and unspoken answer. His hands, acting on long-suppressed instinct, moved over Elias's body, feeling the way his breath hitched, the tremors that ran through him. He knew it was fury, not passion, that made him tremble. Elias cursed him, asking if he had lost his mind. Julian didn't want to see the rejection in his eyes, so he turned Elias onto his stomach, pinning him, forcing his head to the side. In the struggle, he bit Elias's lip, tasting blood. He admitted that he had gone mad long ago, from the first moment he saw him. Elias's reaction was primal, a cry of pain and outrage as he bit down hard on Julian's shoulder. He spat the words, full of regret and venom, that he wished he had never saved the wretched animal he had become. He vowed he would kill him. Then he closed his eyes, his jaw tight, the flush on his face and the rigid set of his body betraying the conflict of agony and unwanted pleasure. Julian felt only a sense of profound, fatalistic completion. This was worth dying for. The next morning, he was awoken by the cold press of steel against his throat. He opened his eyes to see Elias, his face a mask of cold fury. The dagger bit deeper, and Julian felt a warm trickle of blood slide down his neck, dripping onto Elias's wrist. He smiled, his voice calm, and told Elias his hand was unsteady. He reached up, grasping the back of Elias's neck, pulling him closer until their lips almost touched. He shifted his own throat against the blade, guiding it to the fatal spot. He reminded him that he had been taught to kill cleanly, efficiently. Elias tore his hand away, the silver chains binding his wrists clinking softly. The dagger fell from his grasp, clattering to the floor. His anger seemed to drain away, replaced by a hollow exhaustion. He leaned back against the headboard, his voice ragged as he asked what Julian truly wanted from him. Julian reached for him, but Elias flinched away as if struck by lightning. Julian sighed. He told him that from the very beginning, all he had ever wanted was him. Elias's eyes opened, a bitter, mocking light in them. Want him? The anger was back, beautiful and sharp. Julian almost reached for him again but was stopped by a sharp slap across the face. He licked the inside of his cheek, tasting blood, and smiled faintly, inviting him to do it again. Elias, who had faced down armies and assassins without flinching, seemed at a loss for words in the face of this shamelessness. Seeing his advantage, Julian softened. He tugged at Elias's sleeve like a petulant child, his voice pleading. He explained how Elias had been gone for 3 days, how he had looked at that girl, the one who resembled Alara, with such unguarded emotion. He confessed his fear, the terror that if he let go, Elias would leave him forever. Elias seemed shaken. He spoke of the boy he had taken from the tower 10 years ago, a boy he had raised as a brother, a son. He asked, his voice strained, where he had gone so wrong to create this perversion of nature. Julian closed his eyes, tilting his head back. When he spoke again, his voice was thick with unshed tears. He asked Elias if he thought he would have let things come to this if he could control his own heart. He told him he was here, that he would not resist if Elias chose to kill him, but he would never let him leave. He wiped the blood from his shoulder, rose, and began to dress. At the door, he looked back. He told him that waking up and seeing him first thing in the morning had made him genuinely happy. Elias told him to get out. Julian smiled and left for the morning's court session. Throughout the council meeting, his mind drifted. He saw Elias, flushed and breathless beneath him. He saw Elias, cradling his dead sister, his face a ruin of grief. He felt like a boy with his first crush. He rushed back to his chambers, but paused at the door. It was too quiet. Taking a deep breath, he pushed the door open. Elias was sitting at a desk, writing. As he shifted his position, a spasm of pain crossed his face. The man who could endure almost any wound winced, his eyes closing for a second, his grip so tight on the quill that it nearly snapped. Julian's voice was uncharacteristically hesitant as he announced he had brought some salve, admitting that he might have been too rough the night before. Elias looked up, his eyes promising murder. He asked icily if the king was so certain that his subject would not dare to kill him. Julian fell silent, placing the jar on the table. His eyes fell on the document Elias was writing. He was resigning his titles. The words came out through gritted teeth. Elias finished with a flourish, tossing the quill aside. Ink spattered Julian's robes. He stated that with the king now healthy and capable, there was no longer a need for his services. He wished only to return to his family's lands on the border. In a fit of rage, Julian swept everything from the desk. He shouted that he would never let him leave. Seeing the defiant look in Elias's eyes, he added, his voice dropping to a low threat, not unless he was dead. Elias's expression remained cold. He closed his eyes, unwilling to look at him. He reminded Julian that he had spent years building his own network of power and influence, and that Julian couldn't possibly believe a few hundred royal guards could hold him. Julian knew it was true, so he produced a small, intricately carved jade hairpin. Elias's face went pale. He accused Julian of daring to threaten him. The pin had belonged to Alara's daughter, a girl she had cherished. Julian had intercepted the girl's convoy and was keeping her in a secure location outside the city. He warned Elias that if he ever spoke of leaving again, there were 1,000 ways he could make the girl's life a living hell. Elias stared at him, aghast. He struggled to find the words to describe what Julian had become, finally just spitting out a single word. Leave. But Julian didn't leave. Instead, he moved closer, his demeanor changing completely, his voice soft and placating as he took Elias's wrist. He apologized, reverting to the pleading tone he used as a boy whenever he made a mistake. He begged him not to be angry. Elias sneered, pulling his hand away, and asked why a king would need to debase himself before a mere subject. Julian looked at his tense profile and found the childish stubbornness of it far more endearing than his usual cold stoicism. He reached out to smooth the frown from his brow. "Don't touch me," Elias snapped, turning his head away, his voice dripping with disgust. The rejection ignited a spark of cruelty in Julian. He roughly tore open Elias's tunic, revealing the dark bruises and bite marks from the previous night, stark against his pale skin. Elias finally lost his composure. Julian laughed, a cold, bitter sound. He mocked him, asking if he wasn't supposed to be a loyal subject. If the king commands the subject to die, he must die. So now, if the king commands the subject to serve him in bed, shouldn't he obey? Elias's chest heaved with fury and humiliation. But in the end, he simply closed his eyes, his body going rigid in a posture of grim acceptance. This passive surrender enraged Julian more than any struggle. He leaned in, biting the sensitive skin of his throat, hearing the choked gasp Elias tried to suppress. He commanded him to look at him. Slowly, Elias opened his eyes, and in their depths, Julian saw a maelstrom of conflicting emotions. Then Elias spoke, his voice barely a whisper. He asked Julian if he knew why he had chosen him all those years ago. Julian shook his head. It was because he saw the same fire in his eyes. Elias explained, a bitter smile on his lips. The look of a cornered animal that would smile as it tore out its attacker's throat. He had taught him to fight, to think, to rule, hoping he would be able to protect himself. He never imagined that the beast he had raised would be a beast still, even dressed in a king's robes, devoid of human decency. Before Julian could react, Elias moved. With a flick of his wrist, the jade pin he had been holding appeared in his hand, its sharp point aimed at Julian's throat. Julian had anticipated it, turning his head just enough for the pin to slice open the side of his neck. Blood welled up instantly. He licked the blood from his own fingertips, his smile full of pain. He accused Elias of being cruel, asking if he would really kill him for the sake of Alara's child. Elias's hand trembled. In that moment of hesitation, Julian grabbed his wrist, forcing the blood-slicked pin toward his own heart. Elias cried out his name, trying to pull back. The pin ripped through Julian's robes, carving a bloody line across his chest. Julian used the momentum to tackle him onto the bed, pressing Elias's hand flat against the wound. He asked him if he could feel it, the heartbeat of the life he had saved from the North Tower. Elias's palm was covered in his blood, his breathing ragged. "You're insane," he gasped. "Yes," Julian whispered, his lips brushing Elias's ear. "But you can't bear the thought of this madman dying." Outside, thunder cracked, illuminating Elias's pale, stricken face. Julian suddenly released him, stumbling back, letting the blood soak the front of his tunic. He told him to go, to take the girl and run far away. He turned his back to him, leaning against a window frame as a racking cough shook his body. Blood spattered the glass. He told him it didn't matter anyway. He wouldn't survive the winter. The words hung in the air. Elias was on his feet in an instant, spinning him around, his fingers digging into Julian's flesh. He asked what he meant. Julian explained that the arrow he had taken for the former prince had been poisoned, a toxin that had settled in his heart. The physicians had given him a year at most. Elias grabbed his shoulders, his voice raw with disbelief, accusing him of lying. Julian smiled weakly, asking if he wasn't just a beast, after all. A beast deserved to die in a cage. Elias slammed his fist into the pillar next to Julian's head. He demanded to know where the antidote was. Julian told him there was no antidote. Unless Elias's voice was desperate. Unless what? Julian hooked a finger in his belt, pulling him closer, his tone turning light and provocative. Unless the Lord Commander came to his chambers every night and used his body heat to keep him warm. Elias trembled with a rage so profound it left him speechless. But as Julian's strength gave out and he began to slide to the floor, Elias instinctively caught him. Julian buried his face in his chest, feigning sleep. He murmured a bargain. If Elias stayed with him until he fell asleep, he would release the girl. After a long moment of tense silence, a cool hand rested on his back. A small, triumphant smile touched Julian's lips. He still saw him as that broken boy from the training grounds, the one who would curl up in his arms, shivering with pain. He snuggled deeper, inhaling the familiar, calming scent of sandalwood mixed with the metallic tang of his own blood. He whispered that he was so cold. He tugged at Elias's belt, asking him to share his warmth. Elias's voice was a low growl, telling him to sleep. The scent of him was intoxicating. To fall asleep forever in this embrace would be a perfect end. But fate was not so kind. The urgent voice of the Chamberlain shattered the night. A coalition of 3 border kingdoms had formed an alliance, their armies a sharpened scythe poised at the kingdom's neck. At the emergency court session, Elias appeared, a silent, imposing figure. A gasp went through the assembled nobles. Everyone knew of the animosity between the regent and the young king. But now, the faint marks on his neck were visible above the collar of his dark uniform, and bandages could be glimpsed beneath his sleeves. He knelt before the throne. He stated that the northern border was in chaos, and he requested permission to lead the army. His voice was cold as ice. Julian ran a hand over a crack in the arm of the throne, a crack made when he had pinned Elias against it. He granted the request, tossing down the tiger-shaped seal that authorized command of the army. But, he added, he would be leading the campaign himself. The court erupted in protest. Elias was a legendary general, the obvious choice. But Julian met his furious gaze and admitted plainly that he was afraid Elias wouldn't come back. Elias was stunned into silence, then gave a bitter, weary smile. He assured the king that he wouldn't flee. Julian stared at him for a long moment. He gave him an ultimatum. Either they went together or Julian would go alone. They were at an impasse. Finally, Elias relented, on the condition that Julian obey his every command in the field. Julian smiled. "As you command, General." 3 days later, the army marched. Julian and Elias rode side by side at its head. When no one was looking, Julian reached out and brushed his fingers against Elias's. Elias snatched his hand back, but the tips of his ears turned a faint shade of pink. The war was worse than anticipated. The enemy was ferocious, and their forces were pushed back again and again. One night, as Elias stared at the strategy map, his brow furrowed in concentration, Julian urged him to rest. Elias shook his head. There was no time. Just then, a scout returned with news. They had located the enemy's main supply camp. A spark ignited in Elias's eyes. He planned to lead a small, elite team on a raid to burn their supplies, while Julian remained to command the main force. Julian refused. It was too dangerous. Elias simply looked at him, then blew a fine powder into his face. As the world swam before his eyes and he fell into Elias's arms, he heard him say that in the army, his word was law. The last thing he felt was a soft, warm touch on his forehead, light as a dream. He heard a promise that when the king awoke, the battle would be won. When he regained consciousness, it was to the sight of his own bloody hands, the skin torn where he had clawed at the bed frame. He knew his general was invincible, but he also knew Elias was weak from a poison he didn't know he carried. He ignored the protests of his guards, dressed as a common soldier, and rode out with a rescue party. In the blood-red light of the setting sun, he found him. Elias was kneeling amidst the wreckage of the burned supply wagons, a broken arrow shaft protruding from his shoulder. His left arm hung uselessly at his side, clearly dislocated, but his right hand still held a long spear, its tip embedded in the throat of an enemy commander. He looked up, and across the field of corpses, his gaze met Julian's. A bloody, reckless smile spread across his face. In that instant, Julian felt his heart shatter and reform. His general. His ruin. Then Elias collapsed into his arms. That night, Julian dismissed everyone from the command tent. He carried the unconscious Elias to a large bathing pool, tending to his wounds. When Elias awoke, his first instinct was to strike, his elbow connecting sharply with Julian's chest. He told him to get out. Julian caught his wrist, pressing it against the side of the pool. He leaned in close, whispering in the same hoarse tone Elias had used when delirious with fever, repeating the words he had mumbled. "Julian, don't leave me." Elias froze, a rare look of panic in his eyes. He claimed it was nonsense brought on by the fever. Julian smiled, ladling warm water over his injured shoulder. He reminded him of his words from long ago, that if Julian wanted to kill him, he should climb on top of him. Now that he had, he wondered why Elias was so keen to run away. Elias stiffly changed the subject, asking if Julian had pressed their advantage after the raid. Julian ignored the question, burying his face in Elias's neck. He told him he had been asleep for 7 days. Elias looked at him in disbelief. Julian continued, his lips brushing his skin, informing him that their army had won a great victory, and the Lord Commander was to be hailed as a hero. Strangely, Elias didn't push him away. Julian's heart pounded. He looked into his eyes and saw something new there. Elias, who had never been one for baring his soul, struggled with the words. He began to say his name. Julian closed the distance, pressing their foreheads together. Elias confessed that on the battlefield, he had been prepared to die, thinking he had no regrets. But when the enemy blade was descending, the only face he saw was Julian's. A faint blush colored his cheeks as he admitted that at the end of all things, he found he still wanted to see him one more time. Julian could no longer hold back. Elias's lips were cool and tasted faintly of bitter herbs. He kissed him gently, afraid of shattering the fragile moment. Then he felt a damp arm circle his neck. "Beast," Elias murmured against his lips, his breath uneven. Julian smiled, licking a tear from the corner of his eye. He teased him, noting that while his words were harsh, his body told a different story. He lifted him from the water and carried him to the bed. The sounds from the tent did not cease until dawn. On the journey back to the capital, Elias stopped him before he could mount his horse. He looked at him, his gaze heavy, and asked what was wrong. Julian pulled his fur-lined cloak tighter and smiled, asking if he was already missing his husband. Elias scowled and reached for his wrist to check his pulse. Julian let him. The poison was too deep, masked by techniques he had learned long ago. Elias wouldn't be able to detect it. Julian leaned in, burying his face in Elias's neck again, whispering how much he'd missed him. He bit his earlobe gently. Elias hissed in pain, asking if he was a dog always biting. Julian licked the tiny drop of blood away, smiling. He had always wanted to be his dog. He took one last look at the man before him, memorizing the way he held his frostbitten hands to his chest for warmth, the way he stood before an army to shield him, the way his eyes hazed over with passion in their bed. His beloved. As soon as he was inside his carriage, the facade crumbled. He coughed up a mouthful of black blood. The royal physician fell to his knees, his voice trembling. He explained that the poison, the withering kiss, was the most potent in the known world. If not for the king's unique constitution from years of alchemical exposure, he would have died long ago. But his use of golden needles to block his meridians and hide the poison's true nature had caused a catastrophic backlash. There was nothing more they could do. A cold voice cut through the terrified silence. "Get out." Elias stood in the carriage doorway, the physician scrambling past him. He had been suspicious. His hand closed on Julian's wrist, and this time his expression changed. The pulse was erratic, faint, rootless. His voice dropped, dangerously low, as he asked how long Julian had been hiding this. Julian smiled and tried to pull his hand away, but Elias's grip was like iron. The fur cloak slipped from his shoulders, revealing the inside of his arm. It was a latticework of tiny needle marks, from wrist to elbow, the newest ones still bruised and angry. "Just a few days," he said, trying to cover Elias's eyes, telling his love not to look so fierce. Elias ripped open his tunic. The dark, vein-like pattern of the poison had spread from his heart to his collarbone, like a thorny vine. He ground out Julian's name, each syllable a shard of glass. He asked if this was what he called being fine. Julian gave up the pretense and draped himself over him, his breath warm against his ear. He was not fine. He was sick with longing for his Lord Commander. Elias shoved him back, his hands striking the small tea table and sending it crashing to the floor. His fingers dug into Julian's arm. His eyes, usually so calm, were a terrifying shade of red. "The withering kiss," he said, his voice shaking. "You've been drawing my poison into yourself." "You taught me," Julian whispered, trying to placate him. "A general must know what to sacrifice." Elias slammed him against the wall of the carriage. He pressed his palm against his chest, over the old arrow scar, which was now a sickly purple-black. "This isn't sacrifice," he roared, his voice breaking. "This is suicide." By making love to him, Julian had been slowly, deliberately transferring the poison from Elias's body into his own. Elias's forehead rested against his shoulder, his body trembling, like a great beast brought to its knees. "Why?" he choked out. "Because it was my life to give. I was supposed to die anyway." He explained that the poison had been placed in Elias by his own father, a slow-acting curse to ensure his loyalty would never waver. From the moment Elias had saved him, he had been a dead man walking. A choked sob escaped Elias. Julian sighed, cupping his face. Ice crystals clung to his eyelashes, melting like tears. "Because," he said, kissing his trembling eyelids, "the night you carried me from that tower, I promised myself that one day I would carry a burden for you." He kissed the tears from his cheeks. "Don't cry. I won't be able to hold you anymore." He smiled, a genuine, happy smile. "I'm glad it was me who could save you. I finally won against her." Elias looked at him, confused, and then bit his arm, hard. "Lady Alara was my biological sister. The woman my father wanted me to marry was a political pawn. What foolish jealousy have you been nursing all these years?" Julian laughed, a real, unburdened laugh. The world was kinder to him than he deserved. His last sight was of Elias's face. It was enough. His life should have ended in filth and obscurity. Instead, Elias had reached out and pulled both him and his bloody poker into the light. He had learned to fight, to scheme, to chain a god to his bed, but he had never learned how to stop Elias from crying for him. Like now, as he held him, kneeling in the snow, his own great cloak wrapped around Julian's cooling body. It was strange. He was the one dying, but it was Elias whose hands trembled uncontrollably. "Julian, I hate you." "Good. Hate is a reason to live." Elias repeated his name, his voice thick with unshed tears. "If you die, I will burn this kingdom to the ground." Fool. As if the kingdom mattered now. He was glad. Elias had finally learned his brand of madness. He tried to reach up, to touch the mole by his eye one last time, but his hand came away wet. Even his tears were hot. "Elias," he whispered, using the last of his strength to hook his little finger around his. "Next time, let's meet sooner." As his world faded to black, he heard a sound of such profound despair, a cry like a phoenix immolating itself, that it broke his heart one final time. He expected darkness, but was awoken by a searing pain. He saw Elias kneeling before the bed, pulling a dagger from his own chest. Blood dripped from the blade, mingling with Julian's own on the silken sheets, and where they met, a strange golden light shimmered. What have you done?" he gasped, reaching for him. Elias caught his hand, their fingers lacing together. He spoke of the Phoenix Pact, a forbidden magic. Julian tore at his robes and saw it. A magnificent, blood-red phoenix tattooed across his entire back. Elias had endured the ritual, carving the pact into his own flesh, to bind their souls. They would now share a single life, to live together and to die together. Tears streamed down Julian's face. "You madman," he sobbed. Elias's bloody fingers wiped the tears from his cheeks. "No more than a king who makes medicine of his own body." He smiled that devastating, infuriating smile and pressed him back into the bed. The world had given him back. Nothing else mattered. From the Royal Annals, year 18 of the Julian Restoration. In the winter, the emperor recovered from a grave illness. He took the Lord Regent Elias Vance as his royal consort in the Grand Hall. It is noted that the consort later held a sword to the emperor's throat, asking what he would do if the emperor ever risked his life so foolishly again. The emperor smiled, guided the blade to his own chest, and suggested the consort could punish him by making him kneel in their bedchamber every night. From the private log of the royal scribe, year 3 of the everlasting union, the emperor and the consort had a disagreement. The consort left to stay in the army barracks. In the middle of the night, the emperor was seen walking barefoot across the castle grounds, carrying his own pillow. The next day, all the senior army commanders requested leave due to a sudden outbreak of the common cold. From the emperor's personal journal, "Elias scolded me again today, but the tips of his ears were red. I stole the silk ribbon he uses to tie his hair. It smells of sandalwood. If I die, I want to be buried beneath the training grounds where he always stands." From the Royal Annals, year 26 of the Julian Restoration. On the first day of spring, the emperor and his consort passed away together in the Stargazer's Tower. 3 days later, a phoenix and a dragon were seen circling the tower in a vortex of flame. From the ashes, a new royal seal was formed. The new empress wept upon seeing it, and declared the start of a new era, the era of the everlasting.